Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. Big news this morning. The president is on his way back to the United States. He has had, he says, a successful meeting with the president of China. This, my friends, is good news. And the fact that it appears, although nothing is in writing yet, at least I haven't seen anything in writing, it does appear that the president, in his relations with China, has been able to pull off, well, exactly what he wanted to do, a major success. Now we have to wait and see what the tangible result is. But the president said something just before he went into the meeting with the Chinese that to me was very important. He said that for the first time since 1992, we are going to resume nuclear testing. Now that, my friends, is an important question because what does it mean? Was it an implied threat to China and, yes, to Russia? And are we testing nuclear weapons or are we testing the ability to do something with the nuclear weapons, the infrastructure, which, by the way, is affected because many of the people directly involved in our nuclear testing program were laid off because of the government shutdown? There are a lot of questions to be asked and a lot of questions to be answered. But the important element that I wanted to point out today is that when a president feels he's in trouble at home, domestically, a president does engage in foreign policy, and that is constructive. Remember that on the eve of his resignation, Richard Nixon found himself in Russia and in the Middle East. It is a diversion, if you will, from domestic concerns. A president can, in foreign policy, score big points, and that appears to me to be what Donald Trump has done. But there are a lot of unanswered questions, and we must wait and see what develops next. So you're probably going to ask me now, what are the diversions that Donald Trump was looking for? What are the things that are going on that are necessarily difficult? The first, of course, is the government shutdown. We are now in a situation where beginning November 1st, which is just a few days away, we will see further reduction in various programs, including programs to feed the poor and hungry, including healthcare. There are so many issues here that need to be addressed. And I just flew in, and we are told that the air traffic controllers are under even greater stress, and that November 1st for them is an important deadline as well. But the president is going to come home to universal acclaim. But the issues of domestic politics remain. Let me point out that the Justice Department suspended two prosecutors who called what happened on January 6th a mob of rioters. These two individuals were let go, and it appears that this is part of a concerted effort by the White House to rewrite history, what happened on January 6th. Last night, I opened up my report on January 6th, issued by the Select Committee of the House of Representatives, and I reread the opening lines, which point out that it was more than a riot. It was an attempt to obstruct American democracy. And now, two of the prosecutors who had the audacity to call it a mob of rioters, well, the Trump administration is not happy. And it's important to point out that this has to do with the Justice Department, Pam Bondi, who in the end implements this decision. It is also important to note that the Supreme Court yesterday, before it's really done anything else, made a statement on the Chicago situation and the use of the National Guard. They said their deadline now is November 17th. Why? Because they need further briefings. What is it the president wants to do in Chicago? There are a variety of issues, including the upcoming election, which will take place in just a week, when we will see the results of key gubernatorial races in New Jersey and in another critical state in all of this, as all of you know. Let me be crystal clear. The next big issue is in Indiana. Indiana is a Republican state, and the Republican governor of Indiana said on Monday he is scheduling a special session to redraw the congressional boundaries after weeks of pressure from President Donald Trump. This will add more people to the situation now, which exists with redistricting. And that will also affect New Jersey and, yes, Virginia. I omitted mentioning Virginia because I wanted to wait until this moment to point out that redistricting in Virginia is also a real possibility, and it will depend on who wins the election there on Election Day. These are serious issues, and a president can have great success in foreign policy, but it does not and cannot obviate the issues here that we face in the United States. And so, for Richard Nixon, foreign policy was a relief. For Donald Trump, I believe it is also a relief. Yesterday, I alluded to the fact that former President Joe Biden called these dark days as he urged Americans to stay optimistic and not to check out in response to what he says are articles that are important. Those attacks on free speech, those attacks on the limits of executive power. And he is saying, don't check out. And I agree. These are moments of extremes where we have our ups and our downs, where there are successes, and if Donald Trump has succeeded with China, it is a good thing. If the question of the nuclear testing comes up, then we have to deal with that as well. And then there are all the domestic concerns which we face. These are days which try all of us because there are so many ups and downs. But I want to make one other point before we conclude this morning, and that is that with New Jersey and Virginia on the verge of voting, with the question of redistricting taking place across the country now in Indiana, there is a serious question about the stability of American democracy. I know that all of you understand that I've emphasized this in virtually every podcast that we have done this week. The attack on democracy, as I interpret democracy, is real. And that's the key point, ladies and gentlemen, as I interpret it. Because many would disagree with me, would say, oh, no, what Donald Trump is doing is exactly the right thing. And that, my friends, is the divide in our own country, a divide which needs to be addressed, which needs to be dealt with, because we have to be one nation. Do you remember, and I go back to Richard Nixon, the old expression he used when he was elected president, before the inauguration, when he was announcing his victory in 1968? He said he'd seen a young person holding a sign in Ohio that said, "Bring us together." I think what America wants is to have a president who will bring us together and not divide us. And the point is that Donald Trump's method of ruling is divide. And if you divide, can you conquer? We'll see in the midterm elections. Believe me, I'm waiting for those elections, and I think you are too. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. Make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which is, of course, our goal. You can interact with me on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and, of course, my direct email. And I want to say a special word of thanks to Gogo Zoger, who makes this podcast alive and well every single day. We're going to be back tomorrow, so join me then on another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you then.